Daniel was a young man who lived in Babylon. He was a man of integrity who was honest and trustworthy, and those two traits are what made him stand out from above the rest of the society. But how did he become that man? Because he was passionate about prayer to God. He prayed frequently to God. He had a lifelong discipline when it came to his prayer life. That was one reason. Another reason was he was devoted and he loved God. His convictions were set so high that he didn't want his heart tainted or soiled by the wickedness in which he lived in during his time in Babylon. He wanted to live a life of separation from the world he lived in. Daniel refused to give in to political pressure because of his standard and desire to serve the Lord no matter the cost. He was totally and wholeheartedly committed to God. For example, in Daniel 1:8, it says, "But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with wine while he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself." In other words, Daniel didn't want to compromise his standards for God to point that he was only willing to eat beans and drink water for 10 days. The reason he didn't want to eat from the king's kitchen was because the food had been blessed by idolatrous priests. And because of that, the food was ceremonially unclean. Daniel took a stand, and God is looking for us to be modern-day Daniels, because he's looking for those types of voices today who are willing to stand up and remain committed to righteousness, period. Now, Daniel, who I told you was from Babylon, saw everyone caught up in sensuality. The society was so loosely immoral. There was debauchery everywhere, pagan shrines and altars in every corner of the city. Harlots were running the streets. There was open drunkenness. What was once shocking would now become the norm. Even in the synagogues, they were fulfilled of defilement and double standards. They compromised their convictions in the process. Daniel came to a point in his walk with God that he realized, I can't be the voice that God needs me to be unless I'm willing to live a separate holy life for him. God blessed his life so much that eventually others became jealous of Daniel. I want you to remember, friend, that when you make a decision to live a life above reproach, people will go after your relationship with God. When you choose to follow Jesus with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind and strength, the more frustrated Satan will get at you. And he will try to accuse you of something that is not true, like he did in Daniel. In Daniel 6, we read, starting in verse 3, it says, "Then this Daniel began distinguishing himself among the commissioners and satraps because he possessed an extraordinary spirit. And the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom." Now Daniel obviously had an extremely busy job. He was one of the top 3 men in the country. He had great responsibility. The job of an administrator is always a very time-consuming one. But he still managed to find time to pray to God 3 times a day. Daniel 6, 4-5 says, "At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, 'We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God.'" Friend, no matter how much you live for and obey God, people will try to do or say something about you, whether it's where you go to school, you live, your work, but choose to be like Daniel and be faithful in your work or where God has placed you. Daniel 6, 6-7 says, "So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, 'May King Darius live forever.' The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, and advisors and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce that decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days except to you, your majesty, should be thrown into the lion's den." Now, Daniel had lived in Babylon for many years by this stage, and his attitude to the state is very interesting. He played his full part. He was faultless. He obeyed all the laws, and his accusers knew this. They realized the only way to attack him was to make up a law that went against God. So they made it illegal to pray. Aren't we dealing with some certain things like that when it comes to singing? Now in Daniel 6, 8-9, it says, "Now you, your majesty, issued this decree and put it on writing so that it cannot be altered, and according to the laws of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing. When people in society go after your relationship with God, like they did with Daniel, you have to make a choice and either do what's right in the eyes of God or what's right in the eyes of man. It's that plain and simple, church. The decision that you make will affect the destiny that God has for your tomorrow. But remember, that when you decided in your heart to follow hard after Jesus, that there will be obstacles before there can be miracles. And that is where we will continue in our dialogue on Tuesday, July 21st, as we look at Daniel, who was faithful in his prayer life, but still faced enormous obstacles. Thanks for taking time of your day. Stay strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. God bless you.